Oh, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our latest webinar from Cirrus Research. Welcome to you all. Today's topic is cloud monitoring systems for industrial sites. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in a moment. Just first of all, if you've got any questions, we're going to leave some time at the end for me to go through any questions you put to me. Hopefully I can give you some answers. Basically, what you have to do is there's on the side of your screen there's a questions box, so you can ask specific questions in there, and also there's a chat box. If there's any issues or anything like that, put it in the chat, and we'll look at the chat continuously while we're going on today, and obviously we'll look at the questions, and hopefully there'll be a bit of time at the end, maybe 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes maybe, for us to look at that. So welcome everybody. Really appreciate you giving your time today to sit and listen to me talking about cloud monitoring systems for industrial sites. So let's make a start. So first of all, what will this webinar cover? Well, basically, we're going to look at how we monitor different environmental parameters today, typically on industrial sites in particular, although this particular topic, can go far beyond industrial sites as well, but that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to look at how difficult it is currently to sort of measure compliance and keep up to date with how you comply with the different regulatory frameworks. And then we're going to really look at how a cloud-based system can actually help with that. So we're going to go through what the cloud system can give you, look at the different types of information it can hold, and really just go through that in a bit of detail. And then towards the end of the presentation, we're going to look at a specific system that Cirrus Research has. More than Cirrus Research systems are available, I might add, but obviously just look at a specific one that we've set up, and just to have a look at the sort of data that is being captured and what that can give you as somebody who needs to monitor environmental compliance on your site. And at the end of this, we will also send a link so you can actually look at that demo yourself, just to get yourself an idea, because it's a live system, but we'll come on to that a little bit later on. So the first question I always ask, whether I'm doing something about occupational noise or environmental monitoring of any kind, we always ask ourselves, why are we doing the measuring? Because if we didn't have a specific need for it, we wouldn't be spending the money, we would not be spending our time doing this particular type of monitoring. So what we're aiming to do, obviously, is minimize the pollution from our surrounding environment, from our particular site. We're trying to minimize the impact, the footprint that we have on our site, and more importantly, on the surrounding environment and community. And we're doing this by assessing or measuring different environmental parameters, different conditions, and we do that in a number of ways. And what we're aiming to do is to ensure compliance or conformance to a number of specific things. And of course, every site is slightly different, but we will have specific legal duties to comply with, various regulations we need to comply with, site-specific policies, and this is where the good neighbours part comes in. A lot of sites will specifically limit the amount of, for example, noise pollution that they give by monitoring and controlling that. And so the various site-specific policies, which generally tend to be related to the two items above, the regulations and any legal duties, and of course permitted levels. So a number of sites will have planning conditions, whether that's in a national park or related to the local council. So you can do business as long as you do not breach these particular levels. So this is sort of permitted levels of work, of course. And what we're doing when we're trying to ensure compliance and conformance to all of these different things is making sure that we are measuring in a very specific and regulatory way. So we're not just sort of putting our finger in the air and sort of saying, yeah, it's okay. We're measuring using the correct equipment to the correct standards, etc. But we will also, in many cases, have to provide evidence of this. So it's providing the evidence that's the key thing. So if somebody wants to come along and say, well, how much, particulates of a certain level are leaving your site, then you'll need to know what that is, when it was. So there's an awful lot of information that potentially you will have to collect and store to be able to do that. And as I said, it's not just offsite, like your pollution elements, leaving your site and affecting the local community. It's also on site as well. So you'll be monitoring what those various levels are for the protection of your employees. So there's a few different things going on there with why we are measuring. So let's have a look at how we measure now. I'm not saying every site is like this, but there are many different environmental issues affecting industrial sites. I've just got a few there. There are many. We've got noise, which is a big one, air quality, emissions of various gases, VOCs, etc., 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 water quality, soil, a number of things. The list can go on and on, of course. I'm just going to focus on today on a few of them, just to get that point across of how cloud-based systems can help. And of course, with each of these, there are many, many different technical solutions, instrumentation that can be purchased and used to monitor these different elements. They tend to be pretty independent of each other. So it tends to be a mix of integrated systems that's integrated with your site IT, your site computer network. There are a lot which are handheld, so you're basically sampling on a scheduled basis using a handheld device of some kind. And there are obviously standalone systems. So you've got a unit measuring something, and the data is just contained within that unit. It's not linked to anything else. So it's a real mixture of systems. Some of those will tend to be linked to the site infrastructure system. So if somebody has a distributed control system or a SCADA system or something like that, a control room perhaps, with lots of information about how a particular plant is operating. So some of that might be linked directly to it, and some not, of course. So it's a whole different sort of spectrum of the way people actually do the measurement, but also with the type of systems that they use. And of course, this means that data is pretty well distributed in a lot of different places. And we'll have a look at how that might affect things. So it's a bit of a piecemeal approach, and it can become a bit of a piecemeal approach here. As I mentioned, you've probably got data in many different systems, all for very specific purposes, of course, but it is, there may not be any links between them. It's therefore difficult to get a full picture for monitoring environmental parameters across a whole site or even a group of sites. It does become, I guess, a bit more labor intensive. So you've got people with specific skills having to do certain jobs, other people with other skills having to do other jobs, all collecting their information relatively independently, potentially. So that's another issue. And then again, once you've got all that information, how frequent or infrequent it is, that's up to you. Reporting tends to be a little bit more time consuming than it necessarily needs to be, because you've got all that data spread across different people, different systems, different PCs, etc. So putting that all together can be sometimes a bit of a pain. And what that also means is that data is not visible. It's only visible to limited numbers of people. And that data is in different places, and you've obviously got the security aspect of that data, etc., etc. So if you're doing environmental monitoring of a number of different items, what you're trying to do is to make sure you can systemize as much of the measurement as possible, basically to make your lives that little bit easier. So typical site environmental monitoring, I've just chosen a few here. We've got things like noise, where you've got the noise from not only the industrial processes themselves, but also any construction work you've got on site. And vehicle activity is quite a big issue with industrial sites, and those you may consider non-industrial sites. For example, even supermarkets and things like this, or warehouses. They are industrial sites with the one description, and they're all creating some sort of pollution. Air quality, of course, where you've got particulates, PM 2.5, PM 10, even down to PM 1 can be an issue depending on what the processes are, and different gases. So again, depending on the industrial process that is going on, that's where you can get those gases emanating from site, and they need to be monitored. Waste management, many different ways of measuring that. One obviously is water quality. If a company is extruding wastewater from the site, that would need to be monitored as well. And I've just thrown another one in there, which is sort of ground-borne vibration. There are sites which do cause issues for neighbouring communities, even neighbouring businesses with their industrial processes. So that is another potential issue. And of course, if there's any construction activity going on the site, then again, you may need to put in some temporary solutions to monitor the impact of that on the local community. So there's a whole wide range of different types of environmental monitoring. I'm sure you can think of your own, and there's plenty I haven't mentioned today, of course, because we don't really have the time. So why cloud-based systems? So I've got a couple of slides here on why cloud-based systems are potentially a really good solution. Now, we're not saying you can get every single device or environmental monitoring package into them. You will have to carry on doing some spot sampling and things like this. But it just gives you the idea that if you can get, the more you can actually put in there in the cloud into a centralized system, the easier your life will be, and the better you will be at complying to any regulations or limits that you've got set on the site. So I'll go through a few of these points in a little bit of detail. So the first thing that is an advantage with cloud-based systems is pretty obvious. You've got a centralization of the data. So the data is in a single platform. So all of the different environmental parameters that you are logging will be in one place. So it's all in a single database or set of databases, depending how it's set up. So that means that you can, when you're doing your reporting and things like this, it's all available in one place. The next advantage is accessibility. So basically what you've got is access, generally speaking, from common tools. The slide actually should be slightly further over to the right there. Let me just shrink that a bit so you can see it a bit better. So you've got a web browser. And of course, if you've got access to that cloud platform from a web browser, then you can use any tool to look at the data, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, a phone, or even a watch these days. So the accessibility to the information is not based on the fact that you have to install a specific package and get your IT people involved, and it all takes time, and there's a limited number of licenses, and etc., etc., etc. So you can give access to as many people as you wish. Usually they are very secure systems, but you can get them through a standard web browser such as Chrome or Edge or Firefox or whatever. So that makes it really, really useful in getting the data to the people that need to see it. Again, because we've got the data in a single platform, you've got common reporting all from one single system. So you don't have multiple reporting formats. You can actually do straightforward reports from a single system pulling on the data. And if you get really clever, then you can actually combine this information quite easily. So you can, because there are knock-on effects. One system can affect another, and sometimes, for example, with noise, you can look at, well, why was it particularly noisy on that particular day? Then if you've got a weather sensor, for example, then you can say, well, it's because it was over 50 miles an hour. We've had a gale blowing, we've had a storm, we've had lots of rain. That would be why the reason that the noise levels were a lot higher than they normally are. So you can combine the data and actually make better sense of it. So combining cause and effect is another great way of having all of that information together and be able to actually process this in a way that makes sense. Security is the next one. Because cloud-based systems are essentially on a distributed sort of server platform, they're always going to be backed up. There's going to be shadow drives. There's going to be fallback servers. It is a very sort of secure system, and generally speaking, it's not something you have to worry about on site with your local IT people using your own servers. It's things that are usually provided by a company, and whatever system you choose for a cloud-based environmental noise and environmental monitoring system, you just need to make sure that you check out how they're storing the data. At Cirrus Research, for example, we only use servers based in the UK. We use the Microsoft Azure platform, very, very secure, very, very stable. So you just need to make sure you check into that. But you'll never have any data that goes missing because of those backup systems done by companies, and that's their day job. That's what they do. So it's a very secure and long-term system. So a couple of other things. So visibility is the next one. I've mentioned this briefly earlier. Having the data in a cloud-based platform really enables you to have complete visibility over the data that you've got and that you've collected. So it's not just going back in history and looking to see what it was doing last week and seeing what's happening then, but it's also about looking to see what's happening now. So if you have sensors that are continually streaming and sampling the data, which is the ideal situation, then you can see in one single platform live information. What is the noise level now? What is the PM10 level now, etc., etc. So you've got that live information, and because you've got that live information, then you can actually react to it. So when you see a situation getting out of control, whatever that may be, levels starting to rise, then you can have systems in place that warn you when that's occurring. So the live feed of this information and acting and reacting on that can be a very important part of having a centralized cloud-based system. And of course, you've got, as I mentioned, the historical data. So you can go back in time. The data is stored for as long as is necessary for a particular site, many years if necessary. So you can view historic data, which is brilliant because you can look at trends. You can look at things very, very easily over long periods of time. Of course, all this data can be extracted into spreadsheets or in a graphical form. You can look at the trends and do your own analysis on it if required. But the data is always there for you to look at, and it's a really good way of making sure that you keep that continuity of data. Typically, with these sort of systems, there's no limit to actually who can see the data. So as I said earlier, you can have anybody on site, give them access to it, people off-site, external consultancies, whoever needs to get access to the data, you can actually give it. That's not a problem. You can even, and we've seen this quite a few times, give the public access to that data. So it might be beneficial if you've got a particularly site which is has its problems, a very sensitive site, you can give that information or set up a link for people to actually get access to that data. They can see what you see. Obviously, they can't control it. It is limited, but there's ways and means of basically putting a portal screen out there so the public can get access to that sort of data. So you're not hiding anything as a site. You're being open and transparent, and people can actually see the information that you see, obviously within sort of certain limits. But that just means that you're doing your piece for being kind and open and honest with your local neighbourhood. So that can be a real advantage of these sort of systems. And because you've got the live and the historical data, then you can set what we call a common notification system. So you can have alarms where certain levels are breached. You can set limits, and you can sort of have things alarming before it gets too late, to give you time to react and nip any issues in the bud. And typically, these are sort of texts, emails, notifications to an app, webhooks, things like this. So these systems can let you get that information out there when certain conditions occur to a wide range of people. So are there any downsides? Well, yes, of course. I'm not just going to sort of give you all the upsides of cloud-based systems. So there are some downsides. The data that is sensitive, obviously, for your particular site is outside your firewall in this instance. So we know from experience that not every company wishes to go this way. They want everything completely internal. They are very secure systems, but not every company takes that view. So that's one thing you need to consider. But it is becoming more and more common. Less and less companies are particularly strict in that way. But you can obviously think of some of the obvious examples. To get the best out of a cloud-based system, you really need some form of a communication link for the devices. And if you've got sensors that give you real-time or near to real-time information, so whether it's sampling and providing that information, even if it's every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, every hour, or some of them will do it every second, or even quicker than that, having those communication links is really going to make sure you've got the best, getting the best out of that information. If somebody's still doing a manual sample once a month, a soil sample or something that needs processing, and it takes that little bit longer to do, then maybe that's not quite something that you could hand into this. But really, these days with the sort of sensors that are available, you're covering more and more of the environmental parameters that you need to measure, which can be put into a system like this. So you need to make sure that all the devices can be connected. Because some information, some measurements are that infrequent, you might not be able to put them in the system. So there are a few downsides to that. And you just need to carefully consider whether that's the direction you want to go. So a few other things then to consider before I do a little piece on a live system. Alarming, which I've already mentioned, common reporting. Just a quick example there of a noise report from a centralized cloud-based system. Make sure that any sensors that you do have are kept up to date, they're calibrated, and they are sort of fit for purpose for measuring what you need, so you can ensure that the data is accurate. Obviously, make sure that the data is visible. You can set up the people that need to see it. Connectivity we've also mentioned, and I've also put in there weather. So there may be some other sensors other than weather which aren't directly related to. It's not something you need to report on with your environmental compliance, but they do have an effect. And weather, wind, rain, etc., is one of those key ones that, even though nobody's asked me to tell them what the wind speed and direction was, that can be a key influence. It's an influence for noise. Obviously, if wind's blowing in a certain direction, a certain part of the community will get more or get higher noise levels than they would if the wind was blowing in a different direction. For dust, particulates, can be a big thing. So obviously, the dust is going one direction rather than another. So adding a weather sensor into the mix can have some added benefits, even though you don't necessarily might need to report or to log it. Breaches and alarms, these are really good because it's just in a little bit more detail. You want to know when you breach a limit, but what would be really useful is to know when that limit is going to be breached. So with these sort of systems, you can actually predict sometimes. So you can set lower limits. You can look at trends. You can look at how a particular level that you're monitoring, how the slope is. So you can see, when it's likely to breach. And of course, some of the limits that are applied and some of the sort of the permitted limits on the site aren't just about instantaneous values. They're about perhaps averages over a period of time. There might be a nighttime average, a daytime average, an evening average, or maximum levels of particular parameters. So having a system can perform that more complex operation centrally and give you the warning is something that can be really useful. And again, lots of different ways of getting that message out. I've mentioned data visibility. Having graphs and things like that is really good to enable people, your team or the community to understand what the levels particularly are. This is just an example here from some railway sidings down near Birmingham somewhere, where we were doing some noise monitoring for a few weeks. But that's the sort of picture you could have, where people can see what the noise levels are instantaneously. So building trust, making the data visible is another key point of cloud-based systems. Now, there may be other systems that aren't cloud-based that can do this, obviously. I'm focusing on the cloud-based, the principles that matter. How you get there, maybe not quite as important, but if you've got something there that gives you all of these things, why not look at it first? Because it can be really, really useful. So what I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes is our system. It's an example of a system that you can have. We call it the Quantum. The sort of sensors we have on our system are noise monitors, both internal and external, because you can add in to these cloud-based systems internal sensors as well. So you can get a complete picture. It's not just what's happening on the boundary of an industrial site. If you've got lots of large sort of buildings and things, you may want to know what's happening inside. So you can add internal sensors as well as external. So that's what you can do with the noise. Dust monitors, obviously, air quality is a really big thing these days. It's becoming more and more prevalent. People are understanding the risks associated with pollutants in the air a lot more. So dust's an obvious one. So particulates from diesel engines and other processes, obviously. But obviously, you need to look at gases as well. So things like carbon monoxide, dioxide, nitric oxide, VOCs, etc., etc. So there's a whole combination of things that obviously that can be measured. We've got a ground-borne vibration monitor in there, and obviously we've got a weather station associated with it. So what I'd like to do is look at a live site. I'm just going to swap screens here so we can look at a live site, and we'll just take a look at the sort of things, just focusing on what I've described in the last half an hour or so. But let's have a look at sort of what a live system can actually do. So we'll just load it up, and hopefully this will appear. So this, what I'm showing you here is a live site. It's got live instrumentation on it around our factory site in North Yorkshire. You can see the data live, you can interact with it, you can produce reports, you can do, so I will make sure that everybody gets a link to have a look at it. What you can't do with this demo site is obviously change any of the details, because a lot of systems you can actually change the configuration. So you can change the way noise is measured. You can change obviously limits for alarm breaches and things like this. And you can also, for some of the sensors, define the way it creates the results. So having that link to the sensor in a lot of cases is two-way. So it's not just, send me all the data and I'll display it. It's how you want that data to be processed. And with cloud systems generally, you need to look for something that where, and this is the approach we've taken at Cirrus Research, is that we've said, right, this is what we've got now. But if anybody comes along and says, oh, great, I've got this issue and we need this sort of sensor accessing, putting in the same portal as everything else, then that's something we can do. And it's something that we can connect to anybody else's sensors, because most of the sensors I'm about to show you aren't made by Cirrus Research. So we do the noise bits, but the dust and gases and weather, etc., aren't ours. So we're ingesting information from other people's systems. So, and that's quite a straightforward thing to do usually. So that connectivity is really key, and there's no limit to what could be put into a cloud-based system for industrial noise. So what I'm showing you on the screen here is a live picture of noise monitors outside our site. And if you look at the right-hand side here, we've got just numbers from an internal noise monitor and two external noise monitors, one on our northern boundary and one on our southern boundary. And on the right-hand side here, you can see the different views of the information. So I'm on a live view, and it's just an overview. And what we've got up here is noise information. And as you can see, if you look closely, you'll see that it's ticking away. So these particular monitors that we've got are sending information every second back to the cloud. That means we've got an instantaneous live view. So if I was near that monitor and I wanted to clap my hands, you'd see that spike in the noise. So if you've got that live view, and you can see the actual numbers on the screen there. So I can look at this in a few different ways, but one of the ways people seem to like is look at it in a map view. So what I've done is I've just clicked on map here, and it's just zoomed right in to our particular site. Here we are, Cirrus Research, right next to a distillery, which is quite handy. And we do get some noise from them, and we get some noise from the factory on either side. I've zoomed in a little bit further, and you can see some of the information that I've decided to put on the screen so for you to see. So we've got an LEQ there, a noise level, and a noise level down here. We've got a PM 2.5 level because we've got an air quality monitor out there. We've got an internal noise here, and we've got a ground band vibration level there. So we've got that information on the screen, highly visible. People can see it. If you want to know a bit more detail, just click on a particular monitor, and then you get a trace. This one's in the office. It's very quiet. Obviously, people have got their heads down and are working. So the one on the southern boundary here, it's a pretty quiet day outside. So we've also got some frequency information there. So you can see it's all ticking away nicely in a live fashion. And what I can do, if I've got more parameters, I can just click on edit, this button up here. Obviously it's disabled in this mode, and I can add in more and more noise monitors. So you could use such a system as this to actually monitor multiple sites at the same time. So you don't just necessarily on one site, but we'll just focus on the one side of things at the moment. So that, I'm not going to go through all of these options, by the way, but just to show you some of the key things. So this is live information, but we can also look at historic information. And we've got a lot of options here, but if I look at time history, so I'm just looking at noise information primarily here. So this allows me to look at noise information. This is across the whole of today. I've got some traces up there. It does look a bit complicated, so let's simplify it by just removing some of the information that I don't need, just by clicking on them. And I can see from my 3 noise monitors what it's been doing today. But I can go back anytime I want to. So I can go back and look what was happening on the 5th of June. And there's the information from the 5th of June. So, I can go back and look at, so you might be investigating a complaint, for example, and you could use such a system as this to go back and look at what was happening at a particular time. So I've got a couple of spikes here, if you look at the bottom. So I want to zoom in, so I can use this little bar here to zoom in to a particular spiky bit. And here it is in some detail. If I want to scroll back out, I can just use my mouse, scroll back in and out, and just expand this here to sort of a larger period of time. So, and wherever I put my cursor, it's going to tell me what the noise level was. But you'll also notice that down at the bottom beneath this, we have weather data. So we're capturing weather data at the same time. We're displaying it on the same screen. So we've got wind speed and direction, and we've also got precipitation as well on this, just on this screen. If I had a particulate monitor, which I do, I can switch to particulates. So here I've got PM1, 2.5 and 10 on the same axis as the noise, and similar with gases, etc., all on the same axis. So, you can look and you can investigate things with that data all in the same package. That's the point I'm trying to get across. But let's say you're interested in just that information on the particulates or the gases, etc. So if I click on particulates and gases, there's a button on the left-hand side there. I can get more details from the monitor I have here. Here it is. And you can see here that I've got particulates and gases still from the 5th, and I can go and choose any date. I can choose a week at a time just by clicking on week, and it will reload the data for that particular week or day or month. And again, I can go back to June, pick 3 days, for example, and it'll load the data for that particular time period. And of course, all of this data is viewable. It's all exportable, and there are various reports which I'll come on to in a moment. So that's sort of gases, weather data, of course, a lot of information. Again, choose the period you want. There's all the data. We've got precipitation, humidity, temperature in hours. You've got absolutely everything if you need it. So it's all the information is there at your fingertips to make sure that you can actually make sort of decisions you need to make. And of course, we do have alarming or breaches that you might want to be setting up. So we have a settings part down the bottom here where I can set triggers for gases, particulates, or vibration in our case. And then we have a separate page where we can set very specific triggers here on the right-hand side for noise. And you can make these triggers, particularly for noise, quite selective. So you can just not look at a certain level, but you can look at, has the level been increasing during this measurement period that you're in? You can look for noise levels at specific frequencies of noise, frequency bands, etc., etc. And you can and all things together. So you can make it as complex as you want. So having a system that allows you to set for breaches, alarming on certain conditions can really help you sort of manage your site that bit better. And of course, we can set notifications. And here we can set up sort of SMS, email notifications, and webhooks. There's just a few examples there. So you can set up things quite easily based on those triggers that you've set. And those triggers obviously can be for all of the parameters that you're monitoring with environmental systems. We generally have system health options in there, so it tells you how well the system's running. And you can analyze the events themselves. I'm looking at events here. So you can get a list of events. So we've got all of these events for, in this case, I've just selected the dust monitor. Wherever I set a trigger, we can click on it and it'll show me what the trend was at the time that event took place. It'll also show me what all the gases were during that particular event. And if I want to look for an event for a different monitor, I can click on add in the sudden boundary monitor as well. So that's there, and it'll go back for the particular week that I've collected it. And here we should have, hopefully, some noise information. I might need to go a little bit further. There's the one there at the top. so noise information. And on our system, you can actually record the sound itself. So you can play back some audio. So if the noise level was, for example, really high, you set a trigger, you can listen back to it and really work out what was causing it. Was it a truck? Was it noise from your side? Or was it some sort of other noise, a helicopter or a police siren going past? So all that information is at your fingertips. And that's what a cloud system does. You can get access to what I'm seeing here on your PC or a tablet or a phone from that system, as long as you've got the secure login set up. And each company is in control of who gets access to the system. That's what a lot of these cloud monitoring systems do. They give you access to a wide range of information to enable you to do a lot of different things. We have reporting as well. Obviously, all good systems have reporting. And if I click on this report option here, you can see we've got quite a few basic noise reports. We've got reports on air quality, summary, particulates and gases, all sorts of different ones. Or air quality events reports. If you set up triggers, it will report on that. Vibration events, etc. So there's usually with these systems, there's a wide range of reports, but of course, all of this data can be exported and externally to the system, back to your PC in a spreadsheet. Do your own thing. But most of the tools you would hope that people need are in a centralized system. So let's go back to that's just basically a brief view of this A system. Other ones are available, just to give you an idea of the sort of things you can do if you've got all information in one system. A couple of other considerations. I've mentioned a couple of these before, but just to let you know that one of the key things that sites sometimes need is they might have, as I mentioned before, some sort of centralized control system, a distributed control system, a SCADA system, whatever, that's looking after everything on site. And you could say, well, why don't you put all that data into that system? But some of this data really, particularly the noise, is really complex and is a lot of information, and it doesn't really go well into these sort of existing systems. Temperature probes, fine, single values coming in, but with some of these, you've got multiple sets of information, and you can monitor it in different ways. So what you can have is, because this is all in the cloud, you can set up an API to take that data and import it on a regular basis into your existing site systems, so you can maintain that continuity of information in your own site-based systems, for people in the control room and things like that, if you wish. So that's always an option, and Cirrus Research has done that for quite a few different customers. I'll mention weather again, always a good addition. And remember that this is not just an external system for industrial sites. You can add in internal monitors as well and get that complete picture on the site. So just to summarize then, just to give us a little bit of time, sort of 15 minutes or so to answer any questions you've got. Some of the advantages, key ones: centralization of all that data, so you can do things with the data. It's visible to people, so everybody can get access to it who needs to. You're not having to install lots of different pieces of software on multiple PCs. It's just giving people access to web pages and to your instrumentation. That's the simple way of getting that data to as many people as possible, but still securely. So there is a security advantage to the cloud, because everything is hosted and secured off-site, so you don't have to worry about any of the data. Once it's in there, it's in there. And of course, all of these systems really make sure that you can enable some sort of action, timely action, when you need it, because having that data at your fingertips really gives you control over those environmental parameters on your site. You're not waiting to see what happened last week. You're not being reactive. You can actually be proactive if you've got that information centrally available. and those, as I see it, as the advantages of a cloud-based system. So, fairly short and sweet, rattled through it quite a bit, and thank you for listening to that. And I'm just going to have a look now to see if there are any questions. And we don't appear to have any questions or chat items on this. So thank you very much for your attendance. You'll all receive a link to this. There will be links available to this particular presentation on our website. And if anybody does think of anything or would like any further information on anything you've heard or seen today, or would like to disagree with me on what my opinion is on these sort of systems, then please get in touch. And thank you once again for watching today. Goodbye.